What is chatter?
Chatter is the dark side of your inner voice.
Whenever I have a chatter out of fear or insecurity or whatever that thing is, the moment I bring myself to the present, I start thinking about the now. I am here now.
We only have so much attention. We can only focus so much at any given moment in time.
Hi, from Round Glass, this is Living with Sunny. I'm your host, Sunny Singh. I'm here with my co-host and partner, Thomas Power. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
Today, we're going to talk about chatter or inner voices. Thomas, do you have chatter in your head and mind, and do you have inner voices? How does it play for you?
I've got this voice in my head sort of says, Sunny Sing, Sunny Sing, Sunny Sing in my head all the time. I don't know how to turn it off. It's going on and off all the time.
God bless you. Today, we are here with a renowned psychologist, and we're going to talk about chatter. We're going to talk about inner voices. How does it play? How do you cope with it? How do you deal with it? Please welcome Ethan Kross.
Hey guys, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me along, and I'm happy to answer any of the questions you have about your inner voice, chatter, and anything related to that. So let them rip.
So Ethan, for our audience, the first question is, let's clarify, what is chatter, number one, and is it any difference from your inner voice or inner voices and intuition?
Great questions. So let's lay a foundation. Chatter is the dark side of your inner voice. What your inner voice refers to is something that all human beings possess. I like to say that from the outset, because every few months on the internet there's a debate about whether everyone has an inner voice. In fact, all properly functioning human minds have an inner voice. When scientists use that term, what we're referring to is our ability to silently use language to reflect on some aspect of our lives. And it turns out that capacity is a remarkable asset. It is a tool of the human mind that lets us do many different things. I'll just rattle off some of my favorite functions that it provides for us. At the most basic end of the spectrum, it lets us keep information active for really short periods of time in our mind. So I don't know about you, but I will frequently be instructed to go to the grocery store by my wife to pick up groceries, and I will, without fail, upon arrival at the grocery store, forget what I was instructed to purchase.
Oh, thank goodness.
You're not alone. I've normalized it, right? And so what happens when I do that? I used to just call my wife to ask her. Now I do something different. I ask myself, what was I supposed to get? And then I go down the list in my head and I repeat it. Fruit, granola, cheese, right? When you're repeating that information silently in your head, that is you using your inner voice. Your inner voice is part of what we call our verbal working memory system. It's a basic system of the human mind that we rely on every single day. If you memorize a phone number by repeating it in your head, not everyone does that anymore because we've got smartphones, but when we used to, that would be using your inner voice too. So that's one thing your inner voice lets you do. It also lets us simulate and plan. Like before a presentation, I'll often go over what I'm going to say in my head. I'll go through the talking points, often verbatim, from beginning to end, and then I'll actually imagine what someone in the audience is going to ask me. And then I'll take it a step further, and I'll simulate how I'm going to respond to that obnoxious question, typically with an exaggerated response filled with bravado and courage of the sort I would never do in daily life. But that's me using my inner voice to plan. We use our inner voice to motivate ourselves. This morning I was exercising, and the trainer was telling me to do these terribly painful things. Whole time along, I'm coaching myself. Come on, 30 more seconds until you can turn the volume down on the treadmill. Or, you son of a gun, why are you telling me to do these things, right? I'm motivating myself. And then finally, we use our inner voice to make sense of our lives. When we experience events that we have trouble understanding, we turn our attention inward to come up with a story, an explanation that narrates why we are experiencing this event. And that really, those stories give shape to our sense of who we are. That's your inner voice as well. So your inner voice does all of those remarkable things. You would not want to live life without an inner voice. The problem is that oftentimes when we're struggling, we reflexively try to engage this tool because it is so useful, but it jams up on us. It's like, going to get a drill and it's not working, right? And so you keep on squeezing down the trigger to the drill, but you don't make any progress. That's what chatter is. You're experiencing a problem, you try to think through it, but you end up getting stuck in a negative thought loop. You worry, you ruminate, you catastrophize. That's the dark side of the inner voice, and that's what we want to avoid. I think chatter is one of the great problems we face as a species, and I say that not to be hyperbolic or exaggerate the situation. I say that based on what I know about the science here. If you look at that science, what we have learned is that chatter undermines us in 3 domains of life that I would argue really make life worth living. It makes it hard for us to think and perform. Have you ever tried to read a book when you were worried about something and you've read the pages but don't remember anything that you've read? Has this ever happened to you?
Oh, yeah, many times.
Never to me. I don't have that problem at all.
Quite remarkable, Sonny. You are the first person in tens of thousands of people who this. You know what? We're going to bring you to my lab in Michigan, and you're gonna be patient 0. We're gonna open up that mind of yours and figure out what makes you tick.
Once you've got him in that lab, Ethan, shut the door and spin the handle.
Don't you worry, Thomas. We'll get back at him for every little transgression you may have experienced. So look, we only have so much attention. We can only focus so much at any given moment in time. We know this. Attention is limited. If all of your attention is consumed by your chatter, your worries and ruminations, it doesn't leave anything over to do the things we often want or need to do, like focus on a report, pay attention to a speaker, pay attention to a loved one, right? I mean, I've had the experience, I'm willing to admit it, of sitting down at dinner with my family, and all I want to do at the big picture goal, I just want my family to be happy and connect and have this loving relationship, right? And sometimes my daughters sit down and they're so excited to tell me about their day, and I'm there, I'm listening, except I'm not really listening because my mind is somewhere else and I don't hear it, and then I ask them to repeat themselves and I get in big trouble. Like, that's one way chatter sinks us. It can also lead us to choke under pressure, leads to something that we call paralysis by analysis, where you get incredibly skilled performers, business people giving pitches, surgeons in operating rooms, professional athletes who can do things normally without even thinking. And yet once they start experiencing chatter about their performance, the whole behavior unravels, leading to really catastrophic consequences. We saw this recently with Simone Biles dropping out of the Olympics, right? The top athlete of all time, top female gymnast, dropping out at the pinnacle event of her career.
So there are 2 areas I would love to talk to you about, Ethan. One, how do we stop chatter? What tools can we use? And I want to kind of delve into that. And the second is, how do we harness, because at the end there's some state of energy in us, positive and negative. How can we harness the positive side? Or in a way, we got a lemon, how do we make lemonade out of it? So how do we stop chatter? What are the tools? And because you've talked to a lot of people, you've done experiments, from your experiences, what works?
Well, the first thing to get out of the way is there's no single tool that works for all people in all situations. And I think the more quickly we embrace that as a society, the better. We're constantly looking for the one thing you should do. I get asked this all the time. What's the one thing you should do to rid yourself of chatter? I don't know. And I do know, like, it doesn't exist as far as I have learned. So I actually think it does a disservice to us as human beings to even contemplate the possibility that there is one thing that you can magically do to ease all of our different forms of chatter, right? Our emotional lives are so unique and complex. And what we have learned, which I find to be so exciting and really full of hope, is that we have evolved to possess many different tools to help us manage the many different flavors of chatter that we come in contact with in our lives. So in my book, I talk about close to 30 different tools. And what we've learned is that different combinations of tools work for different people dealing with different kinds of situations. And so if you ask me, what's the one thing people can do after listening here to improve their own state of chatter, it's to familiarize themselves with the tools that are out there and to start doing some self-experimentation. Start figuring out, hey, what tools work best for you? If a tool works, keep using it, and then try another one. If it doesn't, leave it behind. In terms of what these mysterious tools are, I haven't mentioned any. I like to break them down into 3 different categories. There are tools that you could use on your own, ways of shifting the way you think or behave that can be really useful. Then there are what I call people tools, ways of engaging with other people in our lives in very specific ways that can help us. I think many people have the intuition that talking to others about their chatter can be useful, and it certainly can. But what people don't often recognize is that talking to other people can also be remarkably harmful and make our chatter worse. So it's really important to know who to talk to and how to have those conversations. And then finally, there are some environmental tools, ways of interacting with our physical spaces, which I find to be just remarkable that can help us. And so let me give you a couple of quick examples of a few tools from those different categories, just to kind of whet the appetite, so to speak, and feel free to ask me to go deeper or move on. Does that sound good?
That sounds fantastic.
Okay. So tools you can use on your own. One thing that chatter does to us is it zooms us in on our problem. We get stuck in this tunnel vision where all we could think about is the source of the rumination or the worry. What we've learned is that when that happens, one natural antidote to that experience is to zoom people out, to get them to step back and think about their circumstances from a broader, more detached, or what we call psychologically distanced perspective. And there are many ways to get distance from your experience. Now, when I say distance, I'm not saying avoiding the problem. I'm saying stepping back and looking at it from a wider angle. One of my favorite distancing tools is a linguistic tool. It involves trying to think through a problem using your own name or the second person pronoun you. We call this distance self-talk. And what it does is it gets us to reflect on what we're going through like we'd think about that problem like someone else is going through the problem. So we put ourselves in a position to start advising ourselves like we would give advice to a close friend. One of the things we've learned over the years is that we are much, much better at giving advice to other people than giving advice to ourselves. Right? A friend or a loved one. Oh, right, Thomas, you're agreeing there?
Oh, yes.
It's remarkable, right? Incredibly sophisticated, wise, intelligent people. They come to me, they're spinning. They don't know what to do. They present the problem to me. Here it's very straightforward. Don't do this, do this. But when it's me, I get stuck. That's because I'm zoomed in. Here's what I love about this tool. This is like a linguistic jujitsu move for switching your perspective. Think about when do we use names? And words like you. We use those parts of speech when we think about and refer to other people. So in your mind, the link between using a name and thinking about someone else is super tight. So when you think about your own problems using your name, what that is essentially doing is it's turning on the mental machinery for thinking about other people. That gives us some mental space, makes it much easier for us to think through our problems objectively.
When you were talking then, Ethan, you introduced the word self-talk.
Yeah.
One word or two words. In using the word self-talk, are you separating chatter as negative self-talk and inner voice as positive self-talk?
It's a great question.
Am I misinterpreting?
No. It's just these questions are good, and there are lots of nuances here that are important to clarify. So chatter, you could think of chatter as a kind of extended negative self-talk, but the idea is that you are really looping over and over, kind of like one of those gerbils on an exercise wheel that's exercising but not making progress. Negative self-talk per se is not harmful in the following sense. sometimes being critical of ourselves when it's done in the right proportions can actually be quite useful. I don't know about, I'm sure this is not true of either of you, but I've messed up on occasion in my life, in my professional life, in my personal life. And when that has happened, it has been instructive to be able to do a post-mortem to, yeah, shouldn't have said that. That was not a good move. And then I can learn from that experience and move on. Now there is some negativity associated with that internal dialogue, right? I'm not trying to dismiss the negativity there. So I'm of the belief that all emotions, the negative ones and the positive ones, are functional. Anxiety in small doses, super duper useful response. If I'd never experienced anxiety before a big presentation, I wouldn't prepare. Right? If I didn't get those butterflies in my stomach. And research shows if you don't have that small levels of anxious arousal, you don't do as well than if you do. What makes the negative emotions toxic is when they are prolonged, when you bathe in them beyond their function. And that's what chatter does.
I want to share something that has worked for me, and I want to hear your expert opinion on if I'm interpreting this correctly. 20 years ago, I had a different kind of chat in my mind. And as I've incorporated more and more holistic well-being in my life, including the fact that how can I be present, live in the now, I have found that whenever I have a chatter out of fear or insecurity or whatever that thing is, the moment I bring myself to the present, I start thinking about the now. I am here now. And then I focus on that chatter or thought. I'm able to kind of get on top of it. I'm able to cope with it. Am I interpreting this right, that the power of living in the now, in the present, being mindful, is that a great way of coping with chatter? Because it seems to have helped me a lot, but I want your interpretation of it.
I think it is one great way of coping with chatter. So I should, be transparent. I've been meditating on and off since the time I'm 5 years old. My dad took me my birthday present when I was 5, which I was not very excited. About was getting a TM transcendental meditation mantra.
I love it.
Okay, so I'm immersed in that space. I was a Eastern philosophy minor in college. I think meditation, being able to strategically focus on the now, are great tools with tons of data behind it. I do think, however, that we sometimes slip into the territory of talking about being in the now, living in the moment as a panacea, as the tool that we should all embrace. And that is where I would recoil and suggest, no, it's just one tool. In fact, there are other tools that involve traveling in time in opposite directions that can be useful for managing chatter. So I'll give you one of my favorite tools. I call it my 2 a.m. chatter strategy. What I mean by that is every 4 to 6 weeks, I don't know why it happens, I wake up at 2 a.m. and the chatter's there. It always takes a particular form. There's a concern. 60 seconds later, I lose my job. Then I'm in jail, then I'm dead, right? That's always the form it takes, and then it goes on a loop. It's not fun at 2 a.m., and it further has interpersonal consequences because my wife starts kicking me because I move around in the bed. You get the message. Here's what I do. I remind myself, I do something called mental time travel or temporal distancing. I think about, how am I going to feel about this tomorrow morning or next week? Or next month or next year. So I'm actually traveling in time into the future. I'm not coming into the present. I'm doing something very different. I'm going forward in time. And that actually helps. And there's been science, lots of experiments in this. What that mental time travel does is it reminds us of something that we lose sight of when we're mired in chatter. What we often lose sight of is the fact that we've dealt with stuff like this throughout our lives. And guess what? We've made it. We've overcome it. Most emotional episodes come and they eventually go. They fade with time. They are unstable. Simply reminding yourself of the instability of what you're going through can be tremendously powerful for arousing feelings of hope, which is an antidote for chatter. And so that is a different way of traveling in time in your mind. That can be quite helpful. I sometimes go back in time too. For the COVID pandemic, when I was stressed out about things, I would remind myself, well, actually, we've been through this before, pandemic of 1918, and that was much, much worse. Took much longer, no Zoom or vaccines or takeout. And we got through that. We'll get through this now.
That's a brilliant answer to a very tough question.
Ethan, Thomas, I've absolutely enjoyed and loved this conversation. Ethan, it's been fascinating. I have learned so much today.
Yeah, superb, Ethan. Absolutely superb explanations, qualifications.
Well, I appreciate both of you. I think we're all aligned in trying to get this science out to help people. So I thank you for having me on, and I've enjoyed it too. I'd love to chat with you both again, and wish you both well with chatter-free days
And
ahead.
Ethan, whenever you want me to be your lab experiment or experiment in your lab, let me know.
I will give you a call. That's a date.
And for our audience, please check out Chatter, a fascinating read. You'll find a lot more information there. So do check it out. This is Round Glass, and we are Holistic Wellbeing. I'm Sunny Singh, and I am Holistic Wellbeing. Thank you. We want to hear from you. It is about your journey of holistic well-being, or if you have any feedback for the show, do please write to us at livingwithsunny@roundglass.com. If you have enjoyed the show, please subscribe. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.